When you'll need to automate tasks that are not only Excel related, you'll need to add references to external libraries to your project. You can do so by using Tools References command in Visual Basic Editor and ticking then the checkboxes of the concerned libraries. Once you'll have validated your choice, you'll be able to use all the classes and globals that exist in the selected libraries. Not only can you add references to DLL, EXE, OLB, or OCX files, but also to Excel-related files, could they be .xlsm or .xlam files. Doing this, you could use in your project all the VBA procedures and classes you created in another project. My best advice before you reference an external Excel file is to rename its Visual Basic project to something else than its default VBA project name, or you'll get confused as both projects will have the same names. To add a reference to an existing Excel file, simply click on the Browse button in Add Library dialog box, make sure to use the right kind of files, and find your file to finally select it. Once a reference is added, you may use all the classes and globally accessible pieces of code that exist in the external library. That, for instance, could be constants, variables, procedures, enumerations, etc. To call one of them, the best because less confusing way is to start by the library's name, then using the dot symbol, and finally the name of what you want to call. For instance, calling Celsius to Fahrenheit procedure of the conversions library would be conversions.celsius to Fahrenheit, and between parentheses an argument value, for instance 15. A very common use case for adding external libraries is to deal with the user's file system. The library you need to reference for that purpose is Microsoft Scripting Runtime Library. Once you added the reference, you can see what the newly referenced library has to offer in the Objects browser. Pick your library in Libraries list, and then have a look to globally accessible items and classes. For Scripting Library, we can see a lot of classes related to the file system, such as drives, folders, files, and file system object, for instance. The Objects browser is the only tool you can use when trying to get explanation about external objects, as online help often won't be available. It will be nevertheless for Microsoft Office software's related libraries we'll see later in this lesson. You can obviously try to Google some kind of search about the external libraries you're using, but the result here again is not guaranteed. Some classes in the external library you reference may be instantiable with a new keyword. You'll have to try on your own to find out if you can use new keyword with a class, trying this operation in a procedure. As you can see, when typing as scripting dot, I only get instantiable classes as suggestions in the autocomplete tool. I could now write a procedure to iterate on all files in a folder and display their names in an MSG box, for instance. For that purpose, I simply need to have a file system object, use its getFolder method to get a reference on a folder object. From this, I can use the files property, that is a collection, that I can iterate on thanks to a file variable and a for each statement. Using the files variable name property, I'll get the name to generate a complete message that I could then display in an MSG box. Of course, I could have checked each file extension and for only XLSX or XLSM files, open them in Excel to get a regular workbook and then manipulate it with my VBA code. Another very common use case for adding external references is automating tasks within another Microsoft Office software. Here again, I would have to add a reference to the software I want to automate tasks with. Then, in the Objects browser, I'd be able to see all the classes that exist in that library, and this time the online help would work. With such libraries, you'll have to declare and instantiate an object of the application class you can find in the external library. Beware though, application also exists in Excel and is obviously confusing. To avoid any misunderstanding and be sure of the origin of application object, just prefix it with the library it comes from, separating them with a dot symbol. You wouldn't have to do this for Excel's application, as this would be the default application, at least as long as you don't change the order of the libraries in the References dialog box. You then have to do many things with your external application, such as creating files, adding contents, and so on, depending on the library you're using. For instance, if you needed to generate a very simple Word document, you'd have to first add a reference to the Microsoft Word object library. Then, in a sub, create a new instance of Word's library application class. Then, from this variable, create a new document, fulfill this document with text, eventually using Excel cells value for that purpose. And, for instance, display Word that would stay hidden if you didn't show it. You could also print out the document and quit Word without having shown it at any time in your process, if this was your intention. Make sure to free all your application variables from memory, as they could stand in memory for long and thus overuse resources. You can do so using the set wd_app equals to nothing statement in this example. One last word about Microsoft Office Software's libraries. When giving the file to other users, if they have the same or a more recent version of the Office pack than yours, everything will work perfectly. But if they had a prior version than yours, then the reference would be broken, and your users would have to add the references on their own. There are methods that can get you rid of this behavior, but they are out of the scope of this lesson. Here it is. You now have the basis to add references to external libraries and use them inside your projects. Have fun with this!